Ice Age temple discovered. Imagine claiming that you found a lost Ice Age temple in the Andean highlands of Colombia. We have reason for calling it Ice Age, and more specifically, Younger Dryas. And that's what we're going to go through right now. To set the discovery in context, the Bogota Sabana, as it's known today, was covered by the glacial Lake Humboldt, or Laguna Bogota, which started receding about 30,000 BC. It slowly reduced across the Bogota Sabana, and in 1967, 3 archaeologists, 2 Colombians and a Dutch archaeologist, discovered 4 archaeological sites. They're indicated on this map here. The oldest and most controversial is Pubenza, dated at 14,000 BC, where they discovered assemblages of mastodon, vipers, and turtles. Tibitó and Abra both date to around 10,400 BC. At the Abra cave systems, which are shown here in the top in that image, they discovered hundreds of pictograms, red ochre pictograms, and petroglyphs shown in the bottom right, and these were also dated to between 8,000 and 10,400 BC. Now, the site that Jay and I discovered, it's within the same 40 kilometers squared. But what's most important is, the reason Jay and I came across the site you're about to be introduced to is because it is on the same level that Laguna Bogota, or Lake Humboldt, was at 10,400 BC. We calculated the lake line and then explored the valley on the hills that were once Ice Age islands at that date line. What we were looking for was evidence of the Abra and Tibitó cultures having hunted and fished further south, using the islands as hunting stations. And we were expecting to maybe find rock shelters or secondary evidence of the Abra culture. And that's exactly what we found. We discovered these 5 rock shelters. And before I start going any further, I've taken the first few minutes. What I want to do is introduce you to my friend and colleague, Jay Parker.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. We greatly appreciate it. As you can see in the pictures here, there are 5 of these rock shelters. They're all roughly the same size, about 2 meters deep, maybe 3 meters deep, 2 meters wide, and round about 2 meters high. You can just about kind of stand up in them. They've got pictograms inside them, especially one of them. It has what Ashley will soon show you. It has pictograms, it has artwork. They're pretty much run at the same level that the lake was at. Some are higher and some are actually on the lake line.
Let's introduce you to the first cave. Here we go. I'm going to pass this over to Jay again in a moment, but I'm going to describe what you see at the moment. In one of the caves, rock shelter 2 in our research, on the roof, shown in this top left photo, there are markings of red ochre on the roof across the predominant rocks that are jutting out. But then below that, as you can see on the bottom left, is a black carbon and possibly red ochre pictogram showing some kind of bulbous-shaped beast, 2 protrusions on the head and a tail. On the right, you can see the close-up, which I added this image to show you an example of an argument that Jay and I maintain, where for the longest time he's believed this represents the eye with the small cut lines going out from it like a starburst, where I maintain this black circle is the eye. When you look at the creature on the left, the interpretations of the creature change. The ratios of eye to body completely alter. We can't ignore the big beast on the top right corner. This is known as a notiomastodon. A notiomastodon is a smaller member of the genus, and the reason we interpret this carving as a notiomastodon is because it was the notiomastodon bone that was discovered in the Abra, and most importantly, in Tibitó, dating to about 10,000 BC, recorded in 1969, they found circular assemblages of notiomastodon bones, which serves as some of the oldest ritual use of animal bones in northern South America. You can go and research the site yourself. It's known as Tibitó, and you'll see the also important quote, ritual assemblages of notiomastodon. So it's not a big skip of faith to assume that the people who were hunting, slaughtering, and ritualizing notiomastodons several kilometers up the valley had maybe painted one in this cave that was on the same level. We're not talking about some advanced culture here. We're talking about hunters on canoes going from their 52 caves of inhabitation to maybe a secondary hunting station or a fishing station, and they carved this animal. What do you think about that interpretation I just gave there, Jay?
The shape of the body suggests a large mammal.
Yeah.
It's a bulbous or rounded body. To me, depending on how you look at it, I mean, I can see a mastodon there as well, as long as you take the black dot to be the eye. And as you know, further up in the slide, there is another one. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility. And as you showed before, in El Abra and in other sites, there are other red ochre paintings. It was something that they did.
Yeah, sure. So regarding the actual materials used to execute this pictogram, the El Abra culture painted with red ochre and black carbon 10,400 BC, 2,650 meters altitude in Lake Humboldt. This cave is at the same altitude in the same vicinity as the El Abra culture. So I would assume too that this is red ochre and black carbon, just exactly what's seen further up the valley that was showed in slide 3, rather than an iron oxide.
I think when Steph was here as well, the archaeologist from Germany, he also commented that it looked like red ochre, and it could be dated, and it did look very, very, very old. A more modern interpretation, the style and their art forms and the way they depicted things were very different. They were much more defined in more modern cultures.
Yeah, I should point out, and just as a disclaimer, when you see in the right picture Jay's finger pointing towards that eye, he isn't touching that image there. It looks like he's on it, but he isn't. He's a good couple of inches from it. We're quite aware that these things can depreciate. Even with our breath being too close, we're exceptionally careful with that. But processes are underway to have this specific pictogram studied further and protected. So, okay, what we'll do then, Jay, is now we're in this cave. We're in cave 2. Here we have this red ochre pictogram. Now, the next slide is going to show you what appears below and slightly to the right of this pictogram. Let's not say anything, Jay, when I put this on. Let's just let people ruminate on what they're looking at. Yeah. Let's just let this sink in and let them read what those two passages say. Because I need to introduce you all to Fontainebleau Forest Park in France. During our research, we spent a lot of time doing comparative analysis with the rock arts of Fontainebleau Forest, beginning at 44,000 BC all the way through to the Bronze Age. Cultures in France carved virtually identical petroglyphs as the cultures in Colombia. On the left here, you can see on the top left, triangular lozenge shapes within 2 parallel lines. Beside that, deep parallel strips, and there, 3 carefully executed triangles. You see 3 carefully executed triangles in Fontainebleau. Here you see what I call the tic-tac-toe board with a dot in the middle. Similar geometries were executed in Fontainebleau cave art. And here we have an assembly of triangles and vertical lines, just as was executed in the contemporaneous culture in France. We're presenting these petroglyphs for the first time. These have not been recorded or seen before. Jay, how deep are these?
I would say between 5 and 8 millimeters on them, but perhaps they were deeper before, and over time they've eroded down. Yeah, but they're visible. and they are raised. You can see the indentations. You can see the lines down them. And they are, I won't say identical, but there's definitely that level of similarity between what we're seeing on the left here in Colombia and what we see on the right, which is in France.
What we're going to do here is deliberately avoid interpreting what these might mean. That would be an intellectual fallacy. How could we possibly begin to understand what was going through the mind of a person 12,500 years ago? But what we can draw are structural similarities. The geometry is matching. There appears symmetry in both France and in Colombia. There seems to be a leniency towards, linear form and then triangular form. In medieval building, those would be the two disciplines of ad quadratum and ad triangulum, two completely different ways of thinking about space. I think what we're looking at here is two cultures that were experiencing the same changes in the environment, because while the Younger Dryas created cooling in the northern hemisphere, it warmed the environment up here. Hunting opportunities were increased between 11,000 BC and 9,000 BC. Megafauna came in from the north and resided here on these Ice Age islands. So I think a shifting climate, not climate change, shifting climate, created the same experience of nature and artistic expressions by the contemporaneous cultures in both places. Now, looking into the process of creation, you would imagine that something like this would have taken a long, long time, a lot of thinking, but tests were done in the Fontainebleau forest in France, and they took a similar piece of sandstone, and an archaeologist took different materials, different types of rock of different strengths. He set about carving and was able to do a 20 centimeter square and sort of fill it, tessellate it with different shapes in 22 minutes. So we're not maybe looking at something that was done by over the ages. It could have been something that was done, say, by 5 people who were sheltering over while on a fishing trip for 3 days into the southern part of the lake. This could have been a stopover and amusing. There is another one, isn't there, Jay? There's like a handprint in there.
A kind of worn down, where it looks like someone's either been resting in it and kind of left the handprint, perhaps when it was wet, or over time someone's been rubbing and eroding it down.
It's so distinctly different. It's rounded, but I do think we're looking at some form of communication. You can quite clearly see in Fontainebleau in France that there's geometric structure, and there's indications of it here in Colombia. While it is more free-flowing, the one in Colombia,
I would say it's difficult to interpret. We're saying it looks like, but really we're guessing. We can never be able to translate. It does look like writing, but to say it is practical.
I didn't say writing. I said a form of communication. Because you gotta,
yeah, that someone could perhaps come and read it and take some information out of it, like maybe a calendar or something like that. I would say it's a possibility, but I couldn't really say either way. Actually, we don't.
Yeah, we are not professors of archaeology or geology, and it's beyond our purview to start saying that this was deliberate communication or writing. But it's really enticing to consider it because of these similarities.
It does look that way. It does look that way.
Indeed. Okay, we're leaving the cave. So currently, we're in a cave on the lagoon line in Lake Humboldt at 10,400 BC, when just up the way, the Abra culture were slaughtering mastodons, armadillos, vipers, frogs, and serpents. This is what we found above the cave. Jay is climbing on top of a rock, which has all of the visual cues of an animal, meaning it has what looks to be a rounded defined head, a long, straight, vertical trunk structure, 2 circular features that could be interpreted as eyes, and on top, where Jay is right now, lo and behold, a perfectly carved circumpunct pictogram, a circle with a hole in the center. A research showed that the mastodon depicted in the Fontainebleau forest on the right is exceptionally close aesthetically. And it too is carved with a series of holes. Now, if this is a mastodon, it matches the assemblages discovered at Abra, just up the valley. So, looking for further evidence of the intentionality behind this carving, apart from the fact there's a large circular pictogram on the head, let's look just a little bit closer at the features in both Fontainebleau and in Colombia. On the Fontainebleau mammoth head, there's an eye depicted with a very clear almond-shaped hole for where the trunk would have extended from. In Colombia, we have an eye with another almond-shaped hole where the trunk would have extended from. Under both, we have a curved feature here as well, representing perhaps the bone, the protruding bone that the tusk secured into. So when Jay and I overlaid the form of the Notiomastodon on the stone, what struck us was that the texture of the mastodon, or the modern day elephant where the trunk bends, seems to be executed where the trunk bends on the stone. This doesn't appear anywhere else on the elephant, isn't on the eye, isn't on the head. It's depicted where the trunk bends. The positioning of these two tusk holes, Jay and I have done lots of thinking on this, and we must remember that the tusk itself would have been one of the most treasured and prized mediums for forming tools and weapons, yeah? After 5 days chasing a mammoth across the islands, tracking it with spears and arrows in it, when it finally fell, the last rites must have been delivered before it was hauled back to camp. And perhaps that petroglyph, in my own artistic reckoning, represents the spot where that last rite was committed.
I would say it's a possibility.
Sure. Think I've left anything out on this mastodon here, Jay? This Notiomastodon?
For the time being, no. The size of it as well is also comparative to the size of the animal back in that time as well as the dimensions on the face, the way what we are assuming as the trunk and the eye, they have the dimensions. They're not one eye further back than the other. It's pretty precise.
It is. The Notiomastodon weighed between 5 and 7 tons. So that, I don't know. I'm not even going to start pretending I could guess how heavy that stone is there. And something else we should add is, because of the nature of the permissions we got to explore the site, we've done no digging or excavating at all. So it's very difficult to determine whether this rock is bedrock or whether it's, a boulder that's been fashioned that goes much deeper. And we just really can't inform about that just now. Those things will all be figured out pretty soon. But right now, we don't know if that's a rock or bedrock, right? Let's move on. And then, my favorite of the site. Just let your eyes rest on that top left image. Not of the Colombian caiman, but of the carved structure below it, with this kind of plate structure on the exterior layer. It rises up over the head, has a deep 1 foot wide, 1 foot deep black hole, the only one on the structure up there. It curves down and comes up to the tip of the snout. It rounds down the front, and they've taken the time to create this bulbous mouth. Look at the patterning. It's all horizontal, puffy scale type patterning until it gets to the mouth. Vertical lines, perhaps indicating teeth, because the black Colombian caiman that was existent during the Younger Dryas in the late Pleistocene, it is defined by having a curl in its lip with a tooth coming up, and I think that's perhaps what we're looking at right here with this large hole section for the mouth. This is the alligator from Fontainebleau Forest in France. And if you look here on the back of the alligator, this is the texturing that's been done. You can see it on the tip of the nose as well. The way that these plates or scale structures have been executed in France is virtually identical to the structure we see here on this enormous animal in Colombia. And I say enormous, that's 6 meters high and about 12 meters long. It is an enormous rock. Jay, let me shut up and pass the alligator over to you. Talk about it.
Okay. As you can see, the what we're calling the eye on the alligator, as Ashley said, it is the only hole in the rock. And perhaps by pure coincidence, is exactly where an eye would be. You can see it's been worked. There's no way that is a natural formation. And there are rocks next to it that don't have that scaled effect on them. And if it were a natural formation and it had taken thousands or even millions of years to form that, it would have formed on all the rocks, not on a specific rock. Mother Nature does not choose and decide where it does its work. They are comparable with the ones in Fontainebleau as well. Both people were clearly seeing the same animal, and perhaps we're looking at two different interpretations of the same animal. But they are very, very, very close. The way the scales are formed, the dimensions where the eye is exactly that distance from the nose as it would be on an alligator.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up there. We should say for the Nodiomastodon in the last image and for this black Colombian caiman, which is still existent in the Amazon further south, we've overlaid taxidermical structures and skeletons, and we've looked at the ratios between eye and nose. I mean, there are many more apparent animals at this site than we're going to show here today and that we showed in our documentary. But the ones that we're showing you here have got geometric ratios within the structure of the carving that highly suggests it is the animal that we're looking at. The good example of this can be seen in the eye snout ratio of the Fontainebleau alligator and the eye snout ratio of ours. Okay, so to us, this is the black Colombian crocodile, also existent in the late Pleistocene around 10,400 BC. So moving on, we get to Jay's favorite, the Hornnosed Viper. I'm in this picture on the top left. I'm there for scale to show you the kind of size of animal that we're dealing with. This one is about 4 meters wide, about 1.5 meters deep, and about 2.5 meters high at the highest point above the eye. For comparative analysis, on the right-hand side is the Fontainebleau serpent in France. This shows, again, like the alligator in the last image in Colombia and France, this scale-like texture effect, which the Guadalupe range does form these pillow-like rocks. What we're suggesting is that the people enhanced the Guadalupe rocks that they already found. Popped in an eye, popped in a nose, popped in a mouth. Let's first of all go over the frame and the form. This head comes up to a peak above the eye. So does the actual skeletal arrangement of the Hornnose Viper. It comes down in a dip here towards the nose, and look at this. A really obnoxious shaped flick at the end. It's very distinct. Someone has definitely added a flick to the end of this stone. You can see chisel marks in the dip where they've accentuated the shape. If you look at where Jay's hand is, this eye is about 1 foot high, foot wide, and it goes in about 12 inches. Inside, it is flat. They have smoothed the inside of that eye. Curious to this eye are these 1, 2, 3 marks up there. Let me just tell you what they look like up close. You can see them. But it almost looks as if clay's been put round the eye and 3 fingers have rubbed a drip off, because they look like 3 smooth channels right there above the eye, again suggesting hand manipulation. And no other part of the rock, the top of the rock, all features this reptile structure that we see on the Fontainebleau serpent, but only round the eye do we see this starburst of scaling like you do around the eye of the Hornnose Viper. So here we go. This is the wonderful thing. The Hornnose Viper was among the zoological assemblages discovered in Abra, along with the Nodiomastodon, along with gators. So far, the animals we've presented all match the zoological assemblages, the bones of the animals discovered 10,400 BC in the neighboring Abra culture caves.
This snakehead is one of the clearest that is there in the site. It's not just a snakehead. It's not just a rock that looks like a snakehead. It's a giant rock that has been propped up on 4 smaller rocks. Someone took the effort all those years ago to lift that rock somehow and put other rocks underneath it to create a distinct position of what we are assuming is the head to be looking up at a certain angle. Also, as you will see in the film, in the back of this, as in Fontainebleau, there is a cave cut into it. Someone has chiseled a triangular cave cut into it.
Yeah. So we've now looked at a cave with a pictogram of a bulbous beast, petroglyphs on the floor, a giant mammoth, an enormous black river Bogota caiman. We've also looked at a Hornnose Viper. Next on the agenda, I thought I'd put together a little composition of just 4 other of the serpent heads. Look at that one on the left here. This appears to be lying along the ground. This is about 2 meters long. Look at that texturing again. And there's one of our overlays. We overlaid a simple grass snake existent through the Younger Dryas and back into the Ice Age in the Colombian Andes. Look at that serpentine-shaped almond eye. They seem to have accentuated rocks that show reptiles emerging from the ground. But these are just 4 examples. I think the first one on the left, Jay. I mean, look at that.
It's a selection of different boulders that have been set or modified in that line to show the curving serpentine figure of the snake and the head. There is a distinct difference between what we're interpreting as the alligator and the snake. They both have that scaled effect, but they're very different. It's not the same scaling effect on every animal. It's designed individually to suit that specific species of animal.
That's really important. So what Jay's saying there, I'm going to reiterate that so it's clear for myself too, is that the alligator has scales. The serpent has serpent skin. We're about to see a range of turtles. They clearly have carapace, shell formation. So you're right. While they can all fall under the broad bracket reptiles, the distinctions between the types of reptiles have been excellently executed. That's a really good point. Some of the stones in the middle of the temple, as big as the others, they have no scaling, no serpent skin, no signs of having been enhanced. So Jay's point is that if it was natural, it would appear on all of the stones in the same geological ridge. However, we will come back to it at the end because some of the stones have been imported to the site, as we know. We just don't want to complicate it at the moment. So we've looked at what we believe to be the horned-nosed serpent, and we've looked at a range of 4 serpents which appear around the temple. Now, moving on to my favorite section, the turtle. Look at that. Fontainebleau on the right, what we've found in Colombia on the left. We're going to start with the shape of what appears to be the turtle shell. Jay down here in the bottom right, big linear chunks have been taken out there to define that round head from this carapace shell. Look at the base of the carapace. That natural flow, which matches what we've shown here, this curve that appears in the tortoise turtle shell with the legs come out. That there is the smoking gun from EJ. What do you think?
I don't believe there's any question of a doubt that is a turtle. Whether it's been placed there and carved, maybe not. Maybe it's been modified and shaped into that.
The turtle was among the most common found animal in Abra, Tibitó, Pabenza, Tequendama, the 4 contemporaneous archaeological sites. The turtle was the number 1 of food source. Obviously, they're fishing in Laguna Humboldt or Lake Bogota.
And lo and behold, the same turtle, the same animal, again appears in Fontainebleau. That's 5 consistently in Colombia and in Fontainebleau.
Both artists seem to have made the extra effort to make a distinction between the head and the body. You know, you can see it here. And here in the bottom left is an example of the carapaces. These shells or scale-like structures on top of this turtle here, you can see them in the bottom. They do just what the turtle shell does, is they come out and they lip underneath, you know, so where the water could run off, if you like, the protective armor. So look, we're going to move on from this turtle. And what I've done now is I've I've put together a collage of other turtle rocks that we have discovered. Look at that. This is back down from the main temple site back onto where the cave is. This one on the left is about 50 meters from the cave. And what I want to point out about the one on the left is right at the back there, where the tail would be, where the fluted tail of the tortoise is. What do we see? A complete change in geometry on that rock. It's been shaved away to come down and fluted at the back there, I would imagine to represent a turtle.
And again, the reptilian scaling that is there is distinct to the other animals, showing a different species of turtle.
Absolutely. Jay, let's take a slide forward and look at this little assembly. You know, again, within meters of the cave, these pop out of the rocks. And what we should point out here is that this head and this eye, you can almost see it here. It isn't just a hole. It's tripartite. It has 3 levels. But these rocks here, which appear to be like the shell, have been added to this head, haven't they, Jay? They've been moved there.
Yeah, man. They've been built up, stacked. I'm not going to say cut, but shaped so as they have a flat surface.
Yeah. The Colombian mud turtle, the reason we put that attribution onto it is because it's defined for having this pointed chin that comes up to the snout with an almost invisible mouth. And it seems to be the artists, if you look at the bottom right here, have tried to recreate that. And this one here, which is right behind it, has a cross in the eye. You can see it slightly there. But it seems to resemble one of those square-jawed snapping turtles, just another genus of turtle, doesn't it? So in the last 4 slides from the curved turtle in the beginning, that there's 5 turtles all within these are all within a couple of 100 meters. And it's the positioning of these eyes that we lean heaviest into when we're out there. You very often will find something or see something and it has the form of something familiar, maybe not even an animal at times. But if it doesn't have an eye, if it doesn't have a distinct mouth or a nose, or at least 2 of those 3, we generally walk past it, don't we, Jay? We don't do anything with it.
We do generally discount those, which may be a mistake on our part. We've discounted some. Maybe they are, maybe they're not, you know, but we don't want to be treading that realm of maybe. We want to be presenting something that is.
I got told yesterday by the guest who's going to be on Tuesday that he was laughing, saying, we thought we were going to be remembered as the Serpent Temple guys or the Ice Age reptile guys. He goes, you'll be remembered as the Turtle Twins. So the reason we put this into the same Colombian mud slider category, look at this beautiful texture along the top of the nose, which is up here on the beast. Where the mouth falls, there it is in this photo. It's a beautiful section mouth, open mouth. And all, again, the ratios. So before I go on to the ratios, I'm going to draw up a point of contention here, something I was going to ask you about, Jay, which is the eye to you. Look at this. This is the bottom, the top one. But what then is that? Do they have is it the ear?
They do. They do. Turtles do have, if I'm correct, I'm no expert in turtles. I'm pretty sure they do have that opening there. If I'm correct, it's their ear.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can remember what I've seen from terrapins and that, when I was a kid in England, my friends used to have these terrapins. And I'm sure they do. They had this red mark and they had kind of an ear behind. Yeah.
And again, look, there's no features down where the jaw of the turtle would be, but see up there on the nose part, it's there. That to me is in our Colombian turtle category for sure. Whether it's the mud slider or some other kind of genus, I'm not sure, but it has all the hallmarks, the eye, the nose, the mouth, and the texturing on top.
It's the dimensions again. The dimensions just, they're perfect, aren't they? They're just, everything's in the right place.
Everything's in the right place, exactly. Jay, moving from the Colombian mud turtle to...
The giant, what are these? These are like armadillos, aren't they? Giant armadillos. Again, we've got this scaling effect, but this is completely different to what we're seeing on the reptiles. And when we look at this next to what you've put here in the image, Ashley, of the actual Glyptodon armor, I mean, that's just an exact match.
It was really hard to photograph the animal, but let me show you. So you can see it's here. The tail is on the middle, but that tail begins here and it comes up in this big dome shape. You can see the head that comes down and protrudes. So to me, it looks visually like a snail because it's flat on the ground, yeah? But when you look at that comparative analysis between the Glyptodon armor and the shell there, or the stone there, it's really, really alluring. No, because look at the sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These two are hexagonal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it seems to me to be beyond the realms of coincidence that rock...
They're so different from the snakeskin.
Indeed, it's so different, like the carapace of an animal.
So I noticed on the Glyptodon as well that they deliberately could put the head on to show that it separates from the shell. There appears to be a line there, a separating mark. Yeah.
The Glyptodon existed in Colombia up to about 6,000 BC, but researchers discovered several years ago that Ice Age cultures in Amazonian Colombia, 500 miles further south, they actually used Glyptodon shells as houses, temporary hunting camps. They found giant turtle shells and Glyptodon armors. So while these haven't been found in the zoological assemblages of Abra or Tibitó or Tequendama, they certainly were here on the Ice Age Islands. It's just that one hasn't been found yet. But I think that there, and especially because if you look at the actual creature, it has this very distinct conical pointed tail, just as this has been smoothed off to reflect that shape of that pointed tail with this little butted on head here. And again, it would explain why this one's so low to the ground. It's flat because they only had stubby little legs, see?
Yeah.
Good. So there's a handful of turtles and what am I calling it? A Glyptodon. Yeah, a Glyptodon is part of the Glyphodont genus.
It's kind of like a giant armadillo, yeah?
It's the same shape and the same shells. Yeah. It's a cousin. It's not true to say that over 7,000 years this changed into an armadillo, but from the same genus, they just forked off sometime in prehistory. But it's known as the Glyptodon giant armadillo. Yeah. Great. So here we go. You ready? You don't know what's coming next.
Well, I don't. We haven't seen the slides, man.
Birds.
The birds. Yeah.
I changed this from the film from the black eagle to the Harpy Eagle because it was a apex hunter, an apex predator in an altitude level during the Younger Dryas in Colombia. That picture on the top right, I should remind, is a bird structure from the Fontainebleau Forest Park in France. On the bottom left, you can see the back of the bird and see this large section here on the right. You can see it's been lifted into place. See it right there, the joining lines, the horizontal and the verticals. That is not the same stone as that. So they have built the body of that bird up at the back. And then look here. This is distinctly different from the carapaces, the snake skin, the shells, and the scales, suggesting that they maybe attempted to show feathering. What do you reckon?
I would agree with you. And again, every detail that is this so-called scaling effect is different on every animal. And this is very, very distinct. For me, the most distinct point here is the ratio between the eye and the beak.
Sure.
And it's so characteristic. I know turtles have beaks. I know they have the eye as well.
Yeah.
But the way they've just captured that feature and the perfection between the dimensions.
That hooked beak comes over, it's cracked. See, there's this lump missing here, Jay, isn't there?
Pieces has either fallen off or been knocked off or some kind of disasters caused that to happen. Yeah.
More of a hook on it there. Like you can see the beginnings of the hook, but there it is there on the real bird. But yeah, we're going to put this into this is going to be our Harpy Eagle in our bird collection. And what we're going to do now is show you another bird. The condor.
If you see either side of it on the picture where Ash is, there's like two blocks. It seems as if it was placed on those blocks and has tumbled over with time. Maybe an earthquake.
This is positioned at the highest, most open point of the temple, closest to the sky. What would they have represented there? Well, the largest bird in the Ice Age, the Andian Condor, the king of the sky.
And also still the largest bird today. And they're also the bird by highest.
Yeah, indeed. And the eye there, it's an enormous libation bowl, a dugout bowl where offerings were perhaps made. But this is our Andian Condor. We see this as the peak of the beak. And this here is the ridge between the eye, the nose and the head. I can just about point it out here. It's also got that kind of ruffled, bobbled head.
Yeah.
But perhaps the coolest thing in this shot for me, Jay, is look here on the on the actual condor. See the nostril right there?
Yeah.
Look there below the eye.
Yeah, it's there, man. On the carving, there's this distinct separation between the actual feathered head and the beak, and you can see the line there, just forward from the eye, which is exactly the same on the real animal.
Yeah. So we've had a Harpy Eagle. We've had an Andian Condor. So there is only one other hunting bird, scavenger, that was existing during the Ice Age, and that is the black vulture, which is still existing today. This is actually one of the first rocks Jay and I ever found, and the reason it captured our interest is because this top part here, where this round eye is, we figure is the eye, which you can see in the bottom right photo up close. That rock's butted onto this long one. The whole of this midsection is textured, like here you can see in the overlay that bumpy, gnarly black skin, and then it stops. Just where the long beak that measures the same as the head starts. This whole stone here is perfectly smooth. See it here in the photos?
Yeah.
It comes right down, stops. Then you have this smooth beak tip. Look at the bird itself. It has this long protruding beak. So yeah, Jay, I'm going to put that over to you.
What really makes this stand out is the fact that it is made from two separate rocks. And as Ash states, one of them is gnarly, like a real vulture, and then the other one is completely smooth. Did they work them? We don't know. What we do know is that the contrast between them is outstanding. And the way it comes down to a smooth tip and again seems to go under. Now, we know Mother Nature does not erode underneath rocks like this.
Yeah.
It's been rounded and smoothed off. And again, coming back to the point, why, if it is a natural phenomenon, why does it not have the scales on the beak?
Yeah.
It stands out from the others there. There are very few there that aren't reptilian. This is one of those. And it does not have the scales on it.
Only the bobbled skin where the bird itself, see on the right.
Where the actual head would have been. The beak is smooth.
It's a leathery, puffy, bobbled texture. And that stone there, you know, so the top stone is a separate stone. So it could be argued that, you know, weathering occurs if they're both different stones. But this whole front part is one stone. Mm-hmm. That section there is completely bobbled and rippled. And that section there is completely smooth. That there stands as really solid evidence to show, because, you know, as you said earlier, if it was natural, it would all be weathered, especially on one example, one rock, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rocks that are a few steps away from these have that serpentine markings on them. And this one doesn't. It stands out, and it suggests that it's definitely not a natural phenomenon.
We've found the three largest birds that, you know, sustained hunters. You know, they lived off them and lived with them. I mean, there's some evidence out there to show that hunters were using eagles to hunt. You know, it's done in Scotland in the 17th century.
In Mongolia, they did.
Owls were used to hunt deer. But can you imagine in an epoch of human history when our entire survival revolved around these animals? Of course, we were using them to hunt themselves. We just don't have much evidence of it, but you could almost say it's an axiom, yeah?
Yeah.
Great stuff, Jay. So let's move on from our bird section to, let's look at some of the supporting archaeology around the site, which suggests what we've presented to you today is indeed the real deal. These are known as Andean libation bowls. These are foot deep, foot or 2 foot wide holes that are cut in rocks. Today, the modern and for the last 1,000 years, indigenous cultures place corn and tobacco and offerings into these holes before they ascend a mountain. Essentially the same as what's been done in Peru. What they're doing is appeasing the opus or the mountain spirit before they enter the dangers of the climb. And we find them carved in, they're prolific around our temple site here, Jay. This here's from the other side of the temple, but I thought I'd show it because it's a long stone mirador with the libation hole cut in with a vista overlooking to the horizon. And There again on the right-hand side, that is in Colombia. That's Fontainebleau in France. Same kind of setup at a high point on a rock overlooking the horizon. One side high, one side low. All of them, if you look here in Fontainebleau, see right there, Jay, there's the channel for the libation fluid to flow out. Yeah. Every one of these has a channel for the libation fluids to flow out. That's how they're distinctly different from grinding holes or sharpening holes. They said you have the channel. But this is the special one at the bottom. Look at that now, Jay. That's on the huge oblong rock that looks almost like an alligator's back.
An interesting point here as well is that all of the rocks that we're claiming look like animals. Each and every one of them has a libation hole on top.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, without failure, all of them. That we can look at it and say, well, the dimensions make it look like a snake. The skin makes it look like a snake. Lo and behold, you get on top, it's got a libation hole. All of them.
And because that's the fact, each of these animals has a libation hole. So we should perhaps have put that in at the start, Jay. So our actual research parameters are, must have 2 of the 3 eye, nose, mouth, got to have a libation bowl, it's got to have the texturing or the scaling. Great, Jay, great chat, because it takes us back to where we were at the start when we were talking about the enormity of name, Ice Age temple.
We put it into the realms of temple. It's because they do have these libation holes. And these libation holes were for ritualistic practice, for some kind of spiritual practice. As you say today, the modern day indigenous people in Colombia, as so in Ecuador or in Peru, they would leave corn or tobacco or something like that. They were very significant, and it would have been a place to leave an offering, to ask for some favor, to ask for permission for something.
This is the pond at the center of what we claim is the temple site. This lies amidst all of the animals you've just seen today, which is you can see Jay sitting at the side of it. There is a large rock bent round, which is almost like a park bench. When you sit on that, you can look into this bowl, which, look at that bottom picture, it's almost like looking like a snake curl, doesn't it, Jay? It's a snake skin, whole thing. You can see
the little pond is like a mirror. It kind of, I speculated myself here. I would like to say that perhaps at that time when we didn't have all these big trees and around it, this at night would have reflected the night sky, and as above, so below. They perhaps would have looked into that, speculating mind, perhaps looked into that and seen the heavens there reflected into that pool of water. And this pool of water as well gives it that emphasis on the temple site. This has no other real function for anything. It's not an animal. It's not really for anything. And the way that the seat is there for you to sit and look into it or look over it gives it a very ritualistic, spiritual feel to it.
To illustrate your point there on that bottom right-hand photo, that's kind of the view you'd be getting. See it, the darkened picture? That's the view you'd be seeing of it reflecting. And where my mind is research-wise is we brushed over it, but I'm kind of tended to think that this horizon, this here forms a false horizon, this bowl, with the horizon. I wonder if the shaping of this bowl matches the visible horizon behind it, right?
That's a very interesting point, Ash. Now, we know in front there are some...
And it would allow for some pretty nifty plans, because then what that would be is that little bowl becomes Lake Humboldt.
It's an interesting suggestion, possibly. I'm not sure Lake Humboldt would have been round, but...
No, but it would be with what they can see, it would represent the water in front of the horizon. Hey, listen, as you say, it's all speculation and stuff.
Perhaps we could look into that. That's a very interesting theory that hadn't occurred to me.
Yeah, it's not uncommon in other places. People would have monument in Peru. It happens. You're walking up towards the Machu Picchu, and there is a stone there, and you position yourself in a small alcove opposite behind the stone, and when you look out, the horizon and the stone horizon blend into one. It is a visual representation of the horizon. And we know ancient cultures love making miniatures of everything. Miniatures was their thing.
However, what they could see. But that's a very interesting theory, man. We could look at that. We could definitely look at that. Now, I'm Not really going to hazard a guess of what this is, because we're in two minds and we can't come down to a defining decision on it. What we can say, and what is proven, is that this extra bulbous part at the back has been added. It's been cut, it's been fitted in, and it's been rounded off so as it joined onto the original stone that's there. Myself and Ashley and other participants, Walter, we've got different theories and we can't come up with a clear definition. What we do know is there is a libation hole on top, and without a question of a doubt, this stone has been cut and shaped and added on to the back of that stone. There is no question of a doubt. Why they did it, what they were trying to create, we don't know. All we know is that that's cut, shaped, moved, and placed and mounted on a dip of other rocks underneath it.
What we have discovered underneath the stone is that that's a perfectly smooth platform they've created for the stone to sit in. They're both at the same curvature for them to have set that in there perfectly. And on top of this stone is the largest libation bowl. While there are skeptics out there, the next and last slide is the one that we really want them to consider. Yeah? These are the evidences of mounting. Look at this enormous, what we call the Hornnose Viper. It is mounted on a platform of 4 rectangular, harder granite stones. The jaw of this animal has fallen off. It's here. There's the mounting stone underneath. They're revealed for us to see. And here's an example of the carved cave Jay mentioned earlier in the back of the reptile's head. I put that in here on the mounted stones because what it does is shows it's archaeological evidence that they were manipulated, that fire in there in the back. But this large round granite boulder, it supports the animal heads. And I think this is beautiful here. I don't know, every time I see it, I swing between a bird and a frog. Jay's frog, it's going to be called Jay's frog for the end of time. I call it the Kermit stone. It's wonderful because of one reason. That top stone has been set on top of the bottom stone. That's been lifted into place. Forget whether those are eyes on top, whether it looks like a bird about to take off. I see this as a wing here with the darker stone. However, those two stones have been united. As Jay always likes to say, well, it didn't fall out of the sky, mate. And there's mud between the two, not stones, mud.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. We're saying mud, but I wonder if it was like an adhesive, like a prototype sand cement or something,
That's worth investigating, actually. Next time we're there, we should have a look at that and see which material is in there. But there is a material in there separating the two stones.
So listen, Jay, on that note, I'm going to tap the end stream. Thank you very much, everybody. Cheers for now. Oh, it's dangerous, Jay.
What you guys may have discovered may rewrite so many things.
Oh my good God. What is that?
It's detailed, like scales, like you can tell it was not natural.
This whole hillside needs excavated. Yeah. It's like a zoo. We found this hill ridge which seems to be embellished or enhanced with reptilian features, with scales with what looks like serpentine skin.